They discovered a deceased female, believed to be an adult, on the floor in the apartment in an advanced stage of decomposition.
Imagine living in a small trailer, surrounded by air fresheners in every corner, trying desperately to mask an unbearable truth. For 6 long weeks, Barbara Burns continued her daily routine, going to work, paying bills, all while her sister's body lay wrapped in a Star Wars comforter just feet away.
I've been a reporter for 20-something years. I've never heard of anybody living with a corpse for that long.
This is what happens when society dumps impossible burdens on one person's shoulders and looks away. When systems meant to protect the vulnerable instead abandon them. When decades of sacrifice end in an unthinkable act of violence. Today, we're diving into 3 devastating cases that expose the cracks in our social safety net. Cracks that people fall through, sometimes never to emerge. Trigger warning though, it's about to get terrifying. Imagine scrolling through Twitter at 3 a.m., your screen's blue light illuminating tears you're trying to hide from the world. The weight of existence feels crushing, and then a notification appears. Someone who seems to understand your pain, offering a way out. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario. This was reality for 9 young souls in Tokyo, their final moments marked by the betrayal of trust in the digital age. This is one of Japan's most haunting, true crime cases. A story that exposes the devastating intersection of social media vulnerability and predatory manipulation. In 2017, Tokyo's suburban landscape became hunting grounds for a killer who turned Twitter into a weapon, proving that sometimes the most dangerous monsters hide behind sympathetic emoji and carefully crafted DMs. The predator's name was Takahiro Shiraishi, and his method was devastatingly simple. His Twitter bio read like a lifeline: "I want to help those who are having a hard time. DM me." Below it, a pinned tweet spoke directly to the desperate and downtrodden. People are bullied all the time at school and work. When you can't handle the place you go to every day and the people there, that'll push you further and further mentally. I think lots of people are suffering and attempting suicide. Even if the news isn't covering it, I want to help these people. Words that seemed like salvation became death sentences for 9 young individuals, each carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. Let's pause for a moment to understand the context. Tokyo, a gleaming metropolis of 14 million souls, harbors a dark reality. In 2019, a staggering 659 young people aged 10 to 19 took their lives across Japan. The pressure cooker of academic excellence, social conformity, and family expectations creates a perfect storm of despair. Mental health support remains stigmatized, leaving vulnerable youth searching for understanding in the digital void. Meet Mizuki Miura, 21 years old, an office worker whose smile masked years of high school bullying and a diagnosis of adjustment disorder. She shared her pain on Twitter, seeking connection in a world that felt increasingly isolated. Shiraishi's seemingly compassionate messages offered her hope. Instead, she became his first victim in a series of methodically planned murders that would shock everyone. The details of what happened in Shiraishi's apartment are nightmare fuel. After gaining Mizuki's trust, he drugged her, strangled her with rope, and violated her lifeless body. But the horror didn't end there. Over 3 days, he meticulously dismembered her body in his bathroom, storing parts in his refrigerator and using cat litter to mask the growing stench of death. Hinako Sarashina, just 19, became his next target. A fight with her mother had left her vulnerable and alone, a situation so many teenagers face. Seeking escape from domestic tension, she found Shiraishi's promises of understanding irresistible. Her disappearance left her family in agonizing limbo, not knowing their desperate search would end in the discovery of unimaginable horror. Perhaps the most gut-wrenching story is that of Shogo Nishinaka, 20, who lived with high-functioning autism and was nursing the raw wounds of a recent breakup. In a cruel twist of fate, Shogo found the will to live after meeting Shiraishi, but by then, he knew too much. His choice to embrace life was violently stolen from him, becoming another trophy in Shiraishi's growing collection of atrocities. The killer's apartment, a mere 150 square feet, became a house of horrors that would haunt first responders for years to come. The smell of decay became so overwhelming that neighbors noticed, but tragically assumed it was sewer problems. In just 2 months, 9 lives were extinguished within those walls, their remains methodically processed like some twisted assembly line of death. The break in the case came through the determined efforts of one victim's brother, who refused to let his sister's disappearance go uninvestigated. Accessing her Twitter account, he uncovered the digital breadcrumbs that would lead to Shiraishi's door. In a brilliant but haunting strategy, he convinced a female friend to pose as a potential victim, setting up the trap that would finally end Shiraishi's reign of terror. On Halloween 2017, police officers approached Shiraishi's apartment, the stench of death growing stronger with each step. Inside, they discovered a scene that defied comprehension: 9 severed heads stored in coolers, hidden under cat litter, tools of dismemberment still coated with evidence of their gruesome purpose. The walls and floors bore silent witness to unimaginable suffering, stained with the blood of young lives cut tragically short. As the news spread, there was an outpouring of grief and anger from the public. People were horrified by the details of the case and demanded justice for the victims. They wanted the worst punishment imaginable for this monster. In court, Shiraishi's true nature emerged in chilling clarity. He said, "It was easier for me to convince people with worries and manipulate them to my way of thinking." He spoke like a robot. No remorse, just simply explaining his reasoning with a flat tone of voice. He also stated this: "There is no doubt that I sliced up the bodies in my bathroom with the intention of destroying evidence. I disposed off their flesh and internal organs like garbage, but kept their bones out of fear that I would get caught." His admission revealed not just individual evil, but a calculated exploitation of systemic failures in mental health support and online safety. The victim impact statements in court laid bare the rippling waves of trauma. One brother's words cut through the legal proceedings like a knife. "My sister never wanted to die. She was trying her hardest to overcome her struggles, and this monster took her life away. I can't forgive him for what he did, and I hope he suffers every day until his execution." On December 15th, 2020, justice was served when Shiraishi received the death penalty. But this verdict cannot restore 9 futures erased by predatory manipulation. It cannot heal the trauma of families who must live with the knowledge of how their loved ones spent their final moments. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our digital world. Every day, vulnerable people reach out into the void of social media, seeking connection, understanding, and hope. Some find genuine support. Others encounter predators wearing masks of compassion. The system continues to fail those who need protection most. After the trial, there was a fresh kind of focus on the dangers of social media and the need for better protection for vulnerable individuals. Twitter implemented new policies to detect and remove content related to S-word and self-harm more quickly. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey spoke on the case, saying it was extremely sad and that Twitter would make sure that it is being used in positive and healthy ways. The legacy of this case must serve as a catalyst for change in how we approach mental health, how we protect vulnerable individuals online, and how we build support systems that actually work. Each victim was more than just a statistic. They were young people with dreams, struggles, and the potential for bright futures, all extinguished by someone who exploited their darkest moments. Picture a teenage girl standing at the threshold of her life, dreaming of friends, school dances, maybe college someday. Now watch as those dreams crumble, replaced by an endless cycle of caregiving that would span 4 decades. This is the story of Barbara Burns, a case that forces us to confront painful truths about family obligation, mental health, and the weight of responsibility that can crush even the strongest spirit. At 15, Barbara Burns' life changed forever. While other teens were choosing prom dresses, she was forced to drop out of high school to care for her baby sister Debbie, who had suffered severe brain damage from scarlet fever. It was 1967, and no one asked Barbara if she wanted this responsibility. No one considered the dreams she might have had for herself. The system simply expected her to step up, and she did. For the next 40 years, Barbara's existence revolved around Debbie, whose cognitive abilities never developed beyond those of a 6-year-old. Barbara worked minimum-wage jobs, cooked meals, managed medications. There were no breaks, no vacations, no chance at a normal life. Barbara's former boss would later testify that she basically didn't have a life, a social life outside of what she had with her sister. They were together 24/7. The weight of this responsibility became even heavier as their mother aged and developed Alzheimer's. Barbara now had 2 dependents, working endless shifts at restaurants and retail stores to keep them all afloat.
She worked from sun up until the dinner shift came in, and then she would go home and make dinner for her sister and her mom.
When their mother passed away in 2000, it should have meant some relief. Instead, it left Barbara alone with a sister who had grown increasingly demanding and sometimes violent. Then came what seemed like a miracle. Their brother John died, leaving Debbie an inheritance of $350,000. The sisters traveled to California and Australia, bought a double-wide trailer, and for the first time in their lives, experienced what it felt like to not constantly worry about money. But dreams, especially delayed ones, can turn terrifyingly toxic. Debbie, with her childlike understanding of money, went on spending sprees, ordering endless toys and Star Wars memorabilia online.
I went to Barbara's trailer a few months after she had quit the store, and it was filled with toys. It was filled with Star Wars characters, Star Wars games, Star Wars pinball machines. I mean, more than a collector.
Debbie demanded her own credit card, sent expensive gifts to a man she met in an online chat room who promised to marry her. Within 3 years, the entire inheritance had evaporated. The reality of returning to poverty hit hard. Their trailer went into foreclosure. Barbara had to return to minimum wage work at age 53, while Debbie grew increasingly angry and violent. Their relationship, already strained by decades of codependency, began to crack under the pressure. On August 14, 2004, Debbie's 40th birthday, the sisters went to dinner at Macaroni Grill. What should have been a celebration turned into another argument about money. When they returned home, the argument escalated into a physical fight. Later that night, as Barbara lay in bed listening to her sisters snoring, something inside her broke. In the early hours of August 15th, Barbara retrieved a .38 caliber revolver she'd bought years ago for protection. Standing over her sleeping sister, she fired a single shot into Debbie's forehead. At that moment, 4 decades of caretaking ended in an act of desperate violence. What happened next reveals the depths of Barbara's trauma. Instead of reporting the crime or fleeing immediately, she continued living in the trailer with her sister's body for 6 weeks. She plugged in air fresheners everywhere, turned the air conditioning to maximum, and tried to go about her normal routine as if nothing had happened.
The air fresheners said weeks, if not months, of someone trying to mask a terrible smell. They were everywhere in the room where the body was found, and they were also in another bedroom and bathroom where apparently someone else had been sleeping afterwards.
When Barbara finally fled to Virginia Beach, the place where her family had once enjoyed happy summer vacations, she worked the night shift at 7-Eleven and lived in a homeless shelter. She continued cashing Debbie's disability checks, not out of greed, but perhaps out of some desperate denial that her sister was really gone. The truth emerged in May 2005, when contractors cleaning out the foreclosed trailer discovered Debbie's body, wrapped in a Star Wars comforter. They thought it was a dead raccoon, which would have explained the stench in the trailer. Imagine how they felt when they saw a human leg sticking out and a face decomposed way beyond recognition.
911, what is your emergency? I'm working over here at St. Pete on a clean out for a foreclosure, and I've got a dead body in the house.
When police finally caught up with Barbara, her confession was heartbreaking in its simplicity. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't face another day of the same crushing responsibility she'd carried since she was 15 years old. One detective would later describe Barbara as the nicest murderer he'd ever met. In prison, where she served 12 years for manslaughter, she was nicknamed Gangster Granny, the first nickname she'd ever had in her life. Remarkably, she thrived in prison, finally free from the burden of constant caregiving. Barbara's case became a story about family obligation and mental health support. How did society fail both these sisters so completely? Today, Barbara lives in a halfway house in St. Petersburg, struggling to process her actions.
And I wish she was still alive. I really do. I loved her and I miss her. And I wish this never happened to her. Every day when I wake up, I just wanted to see her face.
This isn't just a story about murder. It's about the crushing weight of responsibility, the failure of mental health support systems, and the tragic consequences of expecting one person to carry an impossible burden alone. It's about how love can turn to resentment, and how decades of sacrifice can end in an act of desperate violence. December 8th, 2022, should have been a day of celebration. For Ayalu Wandamu, a 61-year-old Ethiopian immigrant who'd spent 20 years building a life in America, it was supposed to be his final shift at the Shell station in Silver Spring, Maryland. For Denise Middleton, 8 months pregnant with a baby boy she'd already named Ezekiel, it should have been another day anticipating motherhood. Instead, it became the day a broken system's failures erupted into unimaginable violence. The security footage tells a chilling story. At 2:58 p.m., Tory Moore walks into the convenience store, grabs an iced tea, and approaches the counter. What follows is a mundane dispute that spirals into horror. When Ayalu, trying to protect himself, picks up a metal pole, Moore pulls out a silver handgun. The flash of gunfire. Ayalu falls. Moore, consumed by rage, climbs onto the counter to fire more shots into the dying man. But this wasn't the beginning of Moore's violence. It was the horrifying end to a trail of destruction that had gone unchecked for far too long. When SWAT teams breached Moore's apartment across the street, they discovered a scene that would haunt even veteran officers. There, decomposing on the floor, lay the body of 26-year-old Denise Middleton. She'd been shot 7 times. Her unborn son, just weeks from birth, died with her. The medical examiner would later confirm the devastating truth. Baby Ezekiel was viable when his mother was murdered.
They discovered a deceased female believed to be an adult, on the floor in the apartment in an advanced stage of decomposition.
For weeks, Moore had been living alongside their decomposing bodies. Neighbors noticed the smell, but their maintenance requests went nowhere. The apartment complex's reporting system had been down for 2 months. Even the overwhelming stench of death couldn't pierce the wall of institutional indifference.
When we heard how badly decomposed her body was, it was just unbelievable to believe that we had been living our lives for that long and not knowing that she was dead.
This is where the story becomes about more than just murder. The system had failed Denise. Just like it failed countless women facing DV, Denise had tried to escape Tory Moore. In June 2022, she filed assault charges against him in Norfolk, Virginia. Her cousin later revealed that Denise had fled to New York, desperately trying to break free from his control and violent outbursts. But like so many women trapped in cycles of abuse, she was pulled back into his orbit with big fake promises. The red flags were everywhere. Moore's criminal record read like a preview of the horror to come: armed robbery, first and second degree assault, kidnapping, narcotics charges, unlawful possession of firearms. He was even legally prohibited from having a gun. Yet somehow, he not only obtained one, but used it to end 3 innocent lives. The tragedy of Denise Middleton's death lies not just in its brutality, but in its preventability. She was a young woman pursuing her dreams as a hairdresser, excited about becoming a mother. She chose the name Ezekiel for her son, after the archangel representing protection and faith. The cruel irony is that the protection she sought from the legal system, from DV services, from society itself, never came. For Ayaliu Wandimu, the intersection with Moore's violence was tragically random. After immigrating from Ethiopia in 2002, he had built a quiet, respectable life centered around his family and faith. A devoted member of the Ethiopian Orthodox community, he was ready to retire and spend more time with his loved ones. Instead, he became the final victim of a system that had failed to contain a known violent offender. When Tory Moore was finally arrested, the justice system revealed yet another layer of dysfunction. Despite admitting to Ayalu Wandamu's murder and initially confessing to killing Denise, Moore was deemed incompetent to stand trial. The families of his victims watched in horror as legal proceedings ground to a halt, their quest for closure delayed by the same system that had failed to prevent these deaths in the first place. The aftermath of this case exposes every crack in our social safety net. A DV victim's desperate attempts to escape ignored. Maintenance requests about suspicious odors, lost in a broken reporting system. In May 2024, Moore was finally found guilty of first-degree murder in Ayalu Wandamu's death, facing life in prison. The trial for Denise Middleton's murder is ongoing at the moment, but for these grieving families, justice feels hollow in the face of such preventable loss. The tragedy of Tory Moore reminds us of the collective failure of our institutions to protect those who needed them most. To think an unborn child who never got the chance to experience life because multiple systems failed his mother when she needed them most, it's almost too painful to think. As we await justice for Denise and baby Ezekiel, their story stands as a stark reminder of the work still needed to prevent such tragedies. Every unanswered cry for help, every ignored warning sign, every system failure compounds until they explode into headlines. But by then, it's already too late for those who needed protection most. 3 different stories, connected by one devastating thread: system failure. How can we build a world where caregivers get support, where mental health care is accessible, and where DV victims find safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into cases that matter. See you soon.